Welcome everybody to our second Digital Dialogues event, MedTech Expertise from the leading specialists. Today's webinar is on MRI safety of medical devices. Before we start, here is some organizational information. As we only have 45 minutes for the webinar, unfortunately, we cannot answer all your individual questions. We will answer some short questions at the end of the presentation. For this, please write your question in Q&A. If you have detailed questions, we will be happy to answer them in individual one-to-one meetings. To take part in a one-on-one meeting, please register on our event website. For further inquiries, you can also contact us by email. After the webinar, the presentation will be shared by email. At the end of the session, we will publish a link to a survey. It will only take a few minutes of your time. We would be grateful if you could give us a brief feedback. This allows us to improve our services and adapt them to your needs. Now let's not waste time and let me give the floor to our expert, Mahdi Abbasi.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Hello, welcome to the MRI safety session. Today I will talk about basics of MRI scanners, different MRI coils generating different electromagnetic fields and their contribution in generating the MRI image. Also, the potential hazards to the patients generated by each of those electromagnetic fields will be addressed. I will shortly talk about the tests can be done to characterize those hazards, and finally we will see that how the services provided by TÜV SÜD helps you as manufacturer of medical devices, and especially manufacturer of medical implants, to overcome the challenges to get the MR labeling for your products. My name is Mahdi Abbasi, and I'm the speaker of this session for MRI safety of medical devices. I'm developing the business of testing laboratory for MRI safety and customer relations. I have 13 years of experience in the field of medical devices and 12 years focusing on MRI development and safety of implants. In addition, I'm product specialist for active implants, and I'm also a quality assurance auditor. You may contact me for a detailed discussion and solution related to your products. Here you see my direct contact information on the right side. What is an MRI? Magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, is a medical device technique by exposing the patient with different electromagnetic fields with the purpose of imaging inside of the body. There are other imaging techniques currently in the market, like CT scan, X-ray, ultrasound. However, MRI as the state of the art allows imaging without ionizing radiation at any arbitrary plane of the body with variable contrast, which gives advantage to MRI in compared to CT and X-ray. The penetration depth and ability to image through bones, as well as the variable image contrast, gives advantage to MRI in compared to ultrasound. But of course, not everything is positive about MRI. MRI is slower and more expensive. The cut of a clinical MRI scanner is shown in the image here. In addition to the patient table, power amplifier, control unit, and housing, every clinical MRI scanner has 3 types of coils. The magnet, which is generating the static field, and is the biggest coil located on the outer layer. The middle layer is the gradient coil, generating the gradient field in kilohertz. And the inner layer with the smallest diameter is the RF coil, generating the radio frequency field in the range of megahertz. The patient's body is simultaneously exposed to all these fields. The processing unit of MRI scanner analyzes the changes to the characteristics of the fields to differentiate the tissue type and states. Different combination of fields and set of parameters are used for imaging different tissues with different contrast Each unique combination and set of parameters is called the sequence. In the next few slides, I will explain a bit more in details the role and characteristics of each field, and in case of RF field, variation of the coils for different imaging purposes. The physically biggest and strongest coil in an MRI scanner is the static coil, generating the static field. There are two variations of the static coil: permanent magnet or superconductive solenoid. Permanent magnet is the older technology, and superconductive solenoid is the newer one. This coil is normally referred to as magnet, and the scanners are identified by the strength of this magnet. For example, 1.5 Tesla, 3 Tesla, 7 Tesla, which 7 Tesla is also available for clinical purposes since a few years ago, but very limited number of those scanners are available. There are research scanners like 7 Tesla scanners, 9.4, and even 20 Tesla, which is a very huge magnet is required for 20. Our focus in this session is, however, the typical clinical scanners, which are 1.5 and 3 Tesla, and are available in hospitals and clinics. Static field is polarizing the proton's spin axis of the patient's body. As you see in the photo, arbitrary polarization of proton axis on the left side, which are polarized on the right side when it's exposed to such a strong magnet. The magnet is more than 20,000 times of the Earth's magnetic field. In the next slide, we will see how this helps in constructing the final image. There are several designs of gradient coil in the clinical scanners. The photo on the left side shows a specific design called fingerprint design in order to generate the electromagnetic field, which is shown in the right image bottom at the cross-section of the patient's body. This frequency modulated gradient field provides a carrier to determine the exact location of the received signal from patient's body in X, Y, and Z axis. So normally the gradient coil consists of 3 coils for 3 directions. The gradient field is applied during RF transmission and RF received time interval. So the processing unit software can analyze the signal to determine the spatial localization of the signal and generate the image. The radiofrequency coil, referred to as RF coil, generating the electromagnetic field in frequency range of megahertz. The RF field deviating the proton spin axis up to 90 degrees away from the polarized angle. This angle is called flip angle and determined by the imaging sequence. You can see that in the bottom image. The transmit coil is generating the flip angle at certain duration in time, and the receive coil listening to the excited protons. Finally, the software analyzes the change in the received field to generate the image. The body coil is built in the MRI scanner used as transmit and receive coil for the imaging of the whole body. But localized RF coils are used when good image quality is required. For example, head coil, neck coil, surface coil for chest and spine, and knee coils. You see those example of those coils here in the photo. The frequency of the RF field generated by the RF coil is tuned to 64 megahertz for 1.5 Tesla and tuned to 128 megahertz for 3 Tesla. The 3 electromagnetic field exposes several hazards to the patients wearing medical implants which contain magnetic or metallic components. As example, the induced force and torque due to the existence of the strong static field is a risk to the safety of the patient. Specifically for large metallic implants like orthopedic implants or those which are in the proximity of a soft tissue, the left image shows the power of a scanner magnet deforming the metallic ladder in the MRI room in a clinic where the allowed proximity to the scanner for metallic objects is ignored. Hazards resulted from gradient field and from exposure to the RF field from RF transmit coil are tissue and device heating, unintended stimulation, and device damage and malfunction. Induced heating and irreversible tissue damage due to induced RF power to the implant surrounding tissue is the most challenging in terms of testing and has the highest risk for patients wearing an active or non-active implants. The left image shows the 3D numerical simulation results of RF heating for a hip implant, where the highest RF induced power are registered at the tip of the single screw and at the end of the stem. More details will be shown in a couple of slides. Additionally, the device can adversely affect the quality of MRI image by generating artifact and reduce the clinical utility of the image, as it is shown in the middle image. Static magnetic field is indicated by B0. B0 induces force and torque, which can result in displacement, movement, and rotation of the implant, which can cause damage to the implant and more severely, irreversible damage to the implant surrounding tissue. The main parameters affecting this reaction are material properties and the size of implants. For example, the ferromagnetic material are a particular concern here. Gradient field is indicated as dB per dt, can cause unintended stimulation and device malfunction due to the induced eddy current. As shown in the image, exposing an implant which is in a uniform field with high frequency electromagnetic field like gradient field is the source of the induced eddy current. This is main concern for active implantable medical devices. In addition, induced heating and induced vibration are also applicable to non-active implants like orthopedic and cardiovascular implants and could cause irreversible tissue damage. The RF field is normally addressed as B1. The most complicated interaction of MRI with active and non-active implants are the RF heating and induced electrical current, which is the concern for active implants and induced heating applicable to all implants. The interaction is very sensitive to the amplitude and phase of the RF field at the exact location of the implant in the body, as well as the homogeneity of the field. Another main challenge is, for example, analyzing the product portfolio to determine the configuration which leads to the maximum induced power. This means, for example, for a hip replacement joint, the material property, the length of stem, length and number of screws, size of the cup, and thickness of the liner are the parameters to be considered. Or for example, for a pacemaker, all clinical trajectories of the lead must be evaluated. The photo shows an example of a generic hip replacement joint placed in the human model for numerical simulation. The material property of the tissues around the implant and the characteristics of the electromagnetic field at the implantation area and the electrical geometry of the implant are the additional parameters to be considered. And this is all for one type and one size of the RF coil for one MRI scanner brand, and with either 1.5 or 3 Tesla field strength. So we'll see how many parameters and how many different configurations needs to be considered. Well, the result of the simulation shows the highest induced power at the tip of the screw for this specific test. This is the result, which can be verified by conducting metrological measurement in the real MRI scanner or an equivalent test system. The risks to the patients are generated either as the result of an individual field or as the result of the interaction between 2 or even all 3 fields with the implant at the same time. The table here shows, for example, the RF field is the only field responsible for RF heating, but vibration is the result of interaction of static and gradient field with the implant. And obviously, all 3 fields are involved in the image distortion, or so-called image artifact, and the device malfunction. On the right side, the parameters which needs to be considered in the MRI safety testing are listed. We have already talked about few of them, but here are some more MRI scanner design, for example. Field strength, is it a 1.5 Tesla or 3 Tesla or 7 Tesla? Bore design, so it's an open bore MRI scanner or closed bore MRI scanner. Coil design, we have looked into several coil design in the previous slides. Imaging sequences, patient population, body mass, body size and shape. So we can talk about man and woman, children, infants or adults. These are different variable and different patient populations. Implant position or surrounding tissue. If there is a soft tissue around the implant, like brain electrodes, or there is a bone contacting, for example, hip joint replacement implants, and implant trajectories and orientations. Implant trajectories are mostly applicable to active implants with leads. Patient's body position within the scanner. So depend on which part of the body the image is required. So the position of the body inside the bore is different. Implant electrical geometry, that's one of the most important parameters. It's not only the physical geometry, but electrical geometry. Implant material properties, like the conductivity and permittivity. So these are the parameters and variables in MRI safety testing. There are 2 sets of standards which are being used for MRI safety testing. ASTM standards and the ISO technical specification, together with the PC76, specifically for pacemaker and ICDs, which is published recently and is not listed in this slide. There is a separate ASTM standard for RF heating, induced force, induced torque, and image artifact. The ASTM standards are mainly used for non-active implant testing. For active implants, the ISO technical specification and the PC76 are covering all risks and addressing to ASTM standards in some clauses. MRI Joint Working Group, with members from industry, academic, and regulatory backgrounds like me, developed ISO TS 10974 and the PC76. All these standards are used by testing laboratories and implant manufacturers to determine safe MRI scan conditions for MR labeling. There are 3 MR labeling which are addressed in ASTM 2503. Implants, medical devices, and other equipments used in or near the MR environment should be labeled. MR safe label poses no known hazards in any MRI environment and applicable only to those devices that do not include any magnetic, conductive, or metallic material. MR unsafe labeled devices are known to pose hazards to in MRI environments and applicable to devices that include magnetic, conductive, or metallic material and have not been proven to be safe under any conditions. This is the default state for all active implantable devices. MR conditional label is applicable to devices that demonstrated to pose no known hazards in a specified MRI environment with a specified condition of use. Testing is required to show safety under specific conditions to obtain this label. The labeling contains the precise condition which the device were tested and safe for MRI scanning procedure. This is the target labeling for devices which go under MRI safety testing. The target devices for MR conditional labelings are devices intended to enter the MRI scanner bore, such as non-active implants, orthopedics, stents, active implants, IPGs, ICDs, cochlear implants, some patient monitoring devices, and devices intended to enter the MRI scanner room, such as ventilators, anesthesia machines. Typically, conditions to be defined in labeling for items intended to enter the bore of the MRI systems are static field strength. For example, is it MR conditional for 1.5 Tesla or 3 Tesla, or both? Maximum spatial field gradient, specific absorption rate or SAR limit. For example, normal mode with 2 watt per kilogram whole body average SAR, or first control mode, or maximum head average SAR. MRI safety testing service is offered by TÜV SÜD to medical device manufacturers and specifically to medical implant manufacturers. Our expert panel assists you with testing and labeling strategy by analyzing your product portfolio. Either you are an active or non-active implant manufacturer or the manufacturer of devices which are intended to enter MRI scanner room. Our expert panel work with you to identify the required testing to characterize the risk of your product to patients in MRI environment and the path to MRI labeling. Testing activities includes sampling by statistical analysis, numerical and metrological testing, and uncertainty analysis where applicable. We will support you by analyzing the test results and test reports to identify what is the next step to obtain your MR label. In addition to MRI safety testing service offered by TÜV SÜD for the new products in your product portfolio, the Legacy Device Booster Program helps you satisfy the market demand for MR conditional products as state-of-the-art. In this program, we are focusing on your existing product portfolio and boost the life cycle of those devices by MR labeling. Apart from the financial benefits, this strategy differentiates you among your competitors, help you to win market share and satisfy customers. If you are interested in any of the services provided and discussed today, contact me for your personalized consultation specifically for your product portfolio. Here you see my contact information. Thank you for your attention and for your interest in MRI safety testing service offered by us. You can register for your individual one-to-one meeting with the link shown in the chat for a quick kickoff.
Good. Thank you a lot for the presentation, Marty. We received a couple of questions. One question was, where is the MR safety testing lab located?
The MRI safety laboratory is at the moment located in Minneapolis, USA. However, we have people in different regions, for example, in Europe and in US to provide information clients and manufacturers need to evaluate the products and find the strategy, the proper strategy for the MR labeling of the devices.
All right. The next one was, do you have an accreditation for your lab?
The accreditation for the laboratory is a process at the moment is ongoing, and we are expecting in the next 2 months or 3 months, we will receive the accreditation, yes.
And another one was how to start with MR safety testing.
Well, the first step to start with MRI safety testing is you need to contact our expert panel. So you need to contact us with presenting your product portfolio. We will evaluate your product portfolio and we will help you with a strategy with which products we can start, how many testing is required, which risks needs to be tested for your specific product. And then from there, we can move on step by step toward the MRI labeling.
The other questions are pretty product / device related. Therefore, yeah, I think we would kindly ask you to get in contact either with Marty or with the Digital Dialogue email address that we can have a follow-up on these topics and these questions.
Okay, thank you very much.